I know that this economy has presented some twists and turns that none of us could have anticipated, but overall, I believe that we continue to build on our promise of fiscal responsibility, transparency, and responsiveness. And as I work through this morning's presentation, I hope that each of you will be able to see all of these principles shining through in all that we do. Let's start with our budget. And let's start with the podium staying. For the second year in a row, we have less revenue than we had the year before. We're down approximately $2 million from roughly $47 million in 2009 to about $45 million this year. And even though we have less revenue, we have managed to balance the budget and maintain the highest quality of service, the basis of sound financial stewardship. But it was not with good fortune, but steady management and strong partnerships with our vendors, our staff, that allowed us to cut back on expenses while maintaining our outstanding customer service. With 4 years of experience under our belt, we took a good hard look at those services that we felt our staff could now deliver versus those that we would continue to outsource. We then reduced our outsourced contracts from 17 million to roughly 7.5 million. We've replaced some of those outsourced positions with city employees. The end result should save the city approximately $3 million after the one-time costs of transition. Let me clear something up right now. We made these changes without drastically increasing the number of people that work at City Hall or in public safety. In February of last year, we had 222 full-time employees, including those that were outsourced. Today, we have 227, including those outsourced positions. When experts do a comparative measure of the employees per 1,000 residents, and this is an important measure because it sort of determines how you're spending taxpayer dollars, they typically take police and fire out because those numbers vary so much depending on the character of a community. When we do this calculation for Johns Creek employs about 1.1 individuals per 1,000 citizens. According to the information gathered by the Georgia Municipal Association, for cities with population over 50,000, large cities like ourselves, the comparable average is 7.1 employees per 1,000 citizens. Why is this important? Because Johns Creek employs roughly 6 fewer people per 1,000 citizens than the average city, yet we deliver a comparable level of services. And we have the lowest and most efficient level in the state based on cities that GMA has data on. I would say that's probably good financial stewardship and good government. Now we wanted to take it one step further. For those same cities over 50,000 that GMA had data on, and they didn't have it for every city, the average for Johns Creek, when you add the public safety numbers back in, was 3.2 employees per 1,000 citizens, and the average was 10.5 employees per citizens. Johns Creek still continues, while doing all this, to maintain one of the lowest millage rates in metropolitan Atlanta, and certainly one of the lowest for a large city. Bottom line, we ask for less dollars, and we deliver the highest quality of services. In renegotiating our agreements with vendors while taking over the management of subcontracts, we found areas in which we can save money, increase accountability and transparency, which are 2 key components of our governing philosophy. Did the savings compromise service? I'd say no. The recent snow emergency is a great example. John probably won't be happy that I'll share this story with you, but John Kakmar's, how do I say this, a bit jaded. He's been in government for a while. John also comes from the Northeast. He's a bit of a Yankee. You know, Northeasterners, I am too, by the way. I was born in the Northeast, lived there 11 months. Thank God, not longer. But John doesn't take snow in the Southeast very seriously. Matter of fact, he said with me, we've never had a snow event in Johns Creek. So what was it, a week ago? 2 weeks ago? Or was it last night? Anyways, I was sitting at my dining room table. John calls me up and he says, Mayor, when was the last time you looked out the window? I said, I don't know, it's been 30 minutes. He said, would you go to the window and come back to the phone? So I went to the window, I came back to the phone. I said, John, kind of weird. I can't tell the curb from the street. He said, Mayor, we've had our first snow event in Johns Creek. And when a Northeasterner tells you you've had a snow event, you've had a snow event. I don't know if you know this, but Johns Creek was noted in local and national media for our handling of the storm. Before the storm even hit, we had our emergency operations team in place and our plan was in motion. The city staff and subcontractors were salting and sanding known problem areas and bridges before the first snow fell. Additional supplies were already on order, and our snow clearing equipment was on the standby. Our crews worked 24/7 throughout the crisis, and it became clear early on, no offense, Brandon, that the Georgia Department of Transportation had their hands full, and they would probably not be able to clear our state roads. For health and welfare of our citizens, Johns Creek took action. We salted, we sanded, and we cleared those state routes, keeping those vital roadways open. Thanks to our city's aggressive response, we had only 15 accidents, and all of them were minor, during what was probably one of the worst snow and ice storms that we've seen in decades. And when that storm was over, we continued our work. Although it took time, we responded to our citizens' request. We moved into subdivisions. We treated trouble spots so that our citizens could safely return to work or maybe just get to the grocery store. This all speaks to what a great public works and public safety teams we have here in Johns Creek and the importance of extraordinary customer service and always keeping public safety number one. Now let's talk a little bit about public safety. 2010 was our first full year of operations for Chatcom. For far too many years, we were dependent on the questionable operations of Fulton's 911 system. Thanks to a team of dedicated individuals and our unprecedented partnership with Sandy Springs, this is no longer the case. Our two cities have teamed up to form our own system. And in an emergency, seconds count, and we count them. Under our new system, we've improved response times overall by over 2 minutes. I don't think much more needs to be said about that, because when seconds count, 2 minutes means a lifetime. Chatcom handles an average of just under 200 calls for service daily. That's over 71,000 calls for service last year alone. The numbers speak for themselves and tell you that this was obviously a much needed service. More importantly, we've drastically improved our system. Additionally, this year, Chatcom is going to offer something called Smart 911. Individuals will now be able to voluntarily log onto the system and enter pertinent information about you or a loved one. Why is this important? Because that information will actually be available to our first responders while they're en route to your emergency. They'll know exactly what they need to do when they get there. Just a note for anyone who has a telephone, whether it be a cell phone, a voice over IP phone, or a landline, would you do me a favor, please? Will you check your bill? Because we are supported by the 911 fee that you pay. That's what pays for this service. And so if you'll check your bill, if it doesn't say Johns Creek on your bill, please call them and have them correct it and tell them that you're in the city of Johns Creek. It's another way you can choose to use Johns Creek and fund your Chatcom service as opposed to the money going elsewhere. And if you need any more information on that, you can always go or email our website, info@johnscreekga.gov, and the website's johnscreekga.gov. Working with Chatcom, of course, is our Johns Creek Police Department. I think many of you are probably pretty aware of them. Most of you will smile about that. You certainly will after I get done telling you a little bit about what they've accomplished. Our traffic fatalities in 2007, before we had a police force, were 12. In 2009, or 2010, it was 0. That's the police force doing their job. Folks, if you drive up and down Medlock Bridge Road and you were here in 2007, we were averaging 400 rear-end accidents a month. We now are down to about 134 a month in 2010. You know how that happens, don't you? You remind people they're speeding. Motor vehicle thefts were averaging 40 a month in 2007. They're down to 2 a month. Vehicle break-ins were averaging 40 a month. They're down to 17 a month in 2010. Not only is this good police work, but I think more importantly, it's sending a very clear message that if you want to do something wrong in Johns Creek, don't come here. This is not the place for you. We'll welcome almost anybody else, but if you're a criminal, get out. And it doesn't come as a surprise that while our Johns Creek department was doing all this, they also received both the Georgia Chiefs of Police and the National CALEA accreditations in 2010. Both of these agencies only recognize forces that adhere to the highest quality standards. And we are the only city in Georgia to receive both in the same year. It should be noted, however, that Johns Creek that the Johns Creek Police also continued some great programs that have shown some success in our community. I'd like to tell you a moment about them. PACT, which is our Police and Community Together program, is our Neighborhood Watch program. SHIELD is our Business Watch program. Folks, if you have a business in the city and you haven't registered for this, please consider doing so. STOP, our teen driver safety program, which is coordinated with our Johns Creek Municipal Court to educate our young people on safe driving. I could tell you lots of stories about this program. If you have some time, you ought to go watch one of the sessions. Rad Kids is an important education program for our youngest children, which enhances their knowledge, skills, and power to protect themselves from violence and harm. And the Johns Creek Police Department still has the only underage drinking diversion program in the state. Teens that are arrested for this offense have the opportunity to have their record erased. In this way, they can work through the program, hopefully learn from their mistakes, and as long as they complete it, they have a chance to have it removed. Folks, this is the kind of arrest that at that young age can really follow them for a very long time, and we're giving them an opportunity to keep their record straight. We've added one new program this last year, the Citizens Police Academy, which graduated its first class last year and is going to begin its second class sometime later this year. Our fire department completes our public safety team. They're not only responsible for protecting lives and property in a fire, which they do very well, but they're also our emergency medical service responder. To that end, we've revamped our relationship with Emory Johns Creek Hospital. Our staff works hand in hand with them to ensure that every transport is the safest, swiftest, and possible. We also, by the way, placed 2 quick response vehicles in the city, and I believe as a result of all of this, we're a considerably safer place to live and work today. Our cardiac resuscitation rate is up from 5% under Fulton County to 16% today. And while doing all this, our department responded to 4,200 total calls for service. And as you can see, 125 of those were working fires, and Chief, I know you like to call those slobber knockers. Seven of our rescues were swiftwater rescue. Please don't forget our longest border is the Chattahoochee River. And 1,300 were emergency medical calls. We've trained over 3,400 children and adults in fire safety, and over 800 have completed a cardiac pulmonary resuscitation and an automatic electronic defibrillator use course. And this past year, our department was instrumental in helping CBaVision, and I know we have representatives here today, our largest employer, become the first heart-ready business in our city. I can't talk about Heart Ready without mentioning Emory Johns Creek Hospital, our city's partner in this great initiative. The hospital emergency operations team worked closely with the city as it was evidenced by 4 emergency response drills that they hosted in 2010. Emory, at no charge, but certainly at great expense to themselves, trained 26 of Johns Creek's medics this year in emergency operating room, operating room, OBGYN, and cardiac emergency procedures. Each of our medics received 32 hours of training as part of this great partnership with the hospital. Emory is also an outstanding partner in our community as well. Listen to this list. They support, among other things, the Johns Creek Foundation, the Johns Creek Relay for Life, the Johns Creek Police Special Olympics Torch Run, the Johns Creek Public Safety Foundation, our Johns Creek Fire Department's partnership with the Georgia Burn Foundation, and of course, they're one of today's sponsors. Thank you, Emory, for all that you do for our community. Now let's talk about what we're doing to work in year in and year out to make this a better place to live or start a business. So much of what we're doing that affects our future has to do with land use. This year, the council and I adopted revised community standards to ensure that we were sending a clear message about what our vision was for future development in the city. We codified our zoning ordinance as well. Both actions make us an easier, more attractive community to do business with, as well as ensure the highest standards going forward. And through the incredible professionalism of our staff and a few years of working closely with the state of Georgia, our city has negotiated an agreement with the state allowing us to review construction plans without oversight from the Georgia Environmental Protection Agency. And we're one of only 50 local governments in the entire state granted this authority. This may seem a little bit in the weeds to you all, no pun intended, but believe me, if you're a developer and you're thinking about, should I invest in Johns Creek or should I go somewhere else? The fact that they can save about 6 weeks in the review process certainly makes us a more attractive place to consider doing business. Our community development department does their part to make our community safer as well. They worked with our fire department to initiate something called the Click to Enter program. You may realize we have a number of gated communities in our great city. And gates are great, except when there's an emergency on the inside and our first responders are on the outside. With our Click to Enter program, our responders can now go right in. This saves response time and saves lives. In addition, our community development department worked with Chatcom to validate over 28,000 questionable addresses to determine and make sure that we could get there as fast as we could. This, again, saves response time. Although we're in the midst of what is turning out to be the greatest housing crisis our country's ever faced, we're still an attractive place to grow, too. Our building permits were up slightly last year, from 102 starts in 2009 to 138 in 2010. And as the market turns around, I think that we're poised to ensure the highest standards, not only in building, but in customer service, making us a very nice place not only to live, but to do business. Our Public Works Department is also an integral part of our quality of life. Without great public works, people will simply not find this a good place to live or do business. Fortunately, we've got a great Public Works team. Ken, don't let that go to your head. This department touches on everything from traffic to swim teams. They're the heroes of that recent snow emergency. They're the patient, and you have to be, negotiators with GDOT, and they're the go-to guys with ball field scheduling and even rescheduling with rainouts. In 2010, our Public Works Department worked successfully to complete the rehabilitation of 10 bridges in Johns Creek, making them safer for travel and more efficient for emergency response. They've also worked tirelessly with the Georgia Department of Transportation to get the McGinnis Ferry Road project completed. And God willing, that road will be completed sometime this year. I'm glad you clapped because I got some bad news. I think they're considering a 90-day extension on that April deadline. But in the meantime, we've got people out there working very hard to keep the project on time, on schedule, and to try to minimize your day-to-day aggravations. And during the process of working with GDOT, we've opened up the lines of communication to let them know if there's a problem on one of their state roads that might exacerbate our traffic problems and get them out there to fix it quickly. Our Public Works team also oversaw the installation of some beautification projects at Abbott's and Jones Bridge Road and also in the State Bridge Road medians this year. In 2011, they're going to be doing even more at the intersection of Bice and Old Alabama. And they're going to be continuing to fill in some sidewalk gaps on Jones Bridge Road and Medlock Bridge Road. And they've worked hard to get the Medlock Bridge portion of our greenway close to completion. We expect to see that finished out this year with some beautiful amenities such as benches, water fountains, and lights. We have an intelligent traffic system that was designed for our entire city last year. And phase 1 of that system is nearing completion, and we expect phase 2 along State Bridge Road to complete later this year. If you don't know what an intelligent traffic system is it monitors traffic and looks at our lights and can actually adjust the timing so we can keep traffic flowing, since ITS is sort of a technical term. In Parks and Rec, we continue to expand our offerings to meet our community's needs. We've improved our parks. We made all the parks ADA compatible. We renovated some aging structures at Autry Mill, and we've added some additional, very much needed parking at OC Park. Last year, we launched our Music in the Park program, and I'm pleased to announce it'll be back for 2011. We had some great feedback, and true to form, we took it all in, and I think this is going to be an even better event this year. The renovation of the historic Newtown Schoolhouse is now complete, and we're looking forward to its opening and the start of senior programming there this year. We've talked since our city's formation about making Johns Creek multi-generational. And I think that this Newtown house and that senior programming is a great step in that direction. And the best part, we're going to open our new dog park in the spring. And the best part about this, I get so excited about this, I jump to that. The best part about this is it's not being funded with taxpayer dollars. And it's not me you should thank for that. You should thank Johns Creek resident Pat McNeely and his dog Coda, who entered a contest with Purina Beneful Pet Food Company, and they won. And as a result, the Newtown Park Dog Park is getting a $500,000 facelift. So, Pat and his dog Coda, and me and Bailey and Molly and all of you and your dogs will soon be able to go out there and enjoy some beautiful amenities. And if you haven't seen the pictures, come to City Hall, because this is a dog park. And this all goes toward making our community a better, more financially sound, and very much attractive place to live and do business. Now let's talk a little bit about our future. A future that I believe cannot be separated from an informed conversation with our community about an economic development strategy for Johns Creek. In order to continue to attract and support business in 2011 and beyond, I intend to work with our council to form a clear, coherent economic development strategy that fits our community's needs so that we can continue to grow and diversify our tax base here in Johns Creek. We need to not only thrive, but we need to encourage our economy to grow here in Johns Creek. We need to tell our story better and broader. We need to make our community more family-friendly and more attractive to those businesses that support those things. Our schools are overflowing with families, and yet they have to drive to Norcross, Alpharetta, wherever, to do something as simple as ice, roller skate, do anything they want. You name it, they've pretty much got to go somewhere else if it's family-friendly. Game of laser tag, go bowling, go to the theater. It doesn't make sense to me that we should have to go somewhere else to do these things. So I think that what we need to do is we need to help people understand more about who we are. We need to get that message out there, because I believe if we get that message out there, those businesses will realize this is the place to come and open, and in the same time, grow our economy. To that end, folks, we need to prepare also for the 2011 PGA, coming right here to the Atlanta Athletic Club. And you're going to learn a little bit more about that in a little while, but I would like to tell you a little bit about some of the numbers that you may not realize. Did you know that the PGA Championship is going to attract between 35 and 40,000 visitors a day that week? That's going to be over 200,000 people for the week. It's going to be broadcast worldwide to over 185 countries or territories around the world. It's going to have a household reach of 560 million viewers. We expect 1,000 media outlets to come to the city from over 13 countries for the coverage. Folks, you can't buy that kind of coverage for a young city, and we expect to exploit that when it's over to help grow our city. And I know many of you are probably thinking, when I mention the PGA and all those people, what about traffic? It's going to be something a little different here. They said that this is the third time it's been hosted. It's the first time that we had a City of Johns Creek. We've been working with the PGA very closely for over 2 years to get prepared for this tournament. We've got a traffic plan. We've got folks that are going to be on the street to try to minimize those inconveniences. And in the end, while we may have some minor inconveniences, and I want you to remember this when the time comes, please remember the one thing, economic development, because I can tell you, I'm not forgetting that. This tournament means a lot for the future of the City of Johns Creek. Share with you one more little story. I was up in Chaska 2 years ago for the tournament. And when I was up there, the mayor said, we held the tournament 5 years earlier in Chaska. But the entire time of the tournament, they said Minneapolis, 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 because Chaska, like Johns Creek, is a suburb of a bigger city. He said that this year, they said Chaska. They say it about 1,000 times a day. Let me tell you something. You may not know this if you didn't watch the tournament, but people know where Chaska, Minnesota is now. And I'm telling you, when this tournament leaves, they're going to know where Johns Creek, Georgia is. In light of our needs to develop economically, we also need to take a very hard and disciplined look at our community. One thing that makes a community attractive or unattractive is infrastructure. Businesses or residents are not going to move to a community that has failing infrastructure. We need to make some fundamental decisions about how and if we're going to finance some very needed improvements in these areas. Bit by bit, your city council has made progress with current tax dollars, but we simply can't keep up. We inherited some pretty big problems. Just as an example, our resurfacing needs far exceed our ability to put enough current cash in every year. We have land that we call Shake Rag Park. Folks, it's not really a park yet, but it can be. Our approach has been slow and steady, using only the dollars that we have available to us. And if that's the approach that the community wants to continue to take, even if it means we can't make significant progress for many more years, that's okay. But in the alternative, do we want to look at a possible bond referendum, which we can use for transportation, infrastructure improvements, resurfacing, even buying more green space. But if we even want to consider that, we have to look at a potential charter change. The charter is our governing document. The city's charter currently caps our millage rate at 4.731 mils. I fully support that cap, and I can tell you the council fully supports that cap. We always have. However, with or without the millage cap, citizens in most jurisdictions would normally have the ability to vote on a bond issuance, separate and distinct from the millage cap. Because after all, they're saying, I want this by their yes vote. That way people can decide whether or not they want to address a particular need in the short term versus waiting for the long term with bonded indebtedness. I've spoken with the authors of our bill that created our city, and I think that was their intent for our citizens. Unfortunately, if you were down at the Capitol at the time our charter got created, it was cut and paste from many other charters. And in that process, inadvertently, this option was left out. We had a complete review by bond counsel, and it's their opinion that if the citizens wanted funding through a bond issuance, those bonds would be subject to the same millage cap. This means that we could issue maybe $4 million worth of bonds, but only if we can get a favorable bond rating. And unfortunately, we've also learned that our bond rating is negatively impacted by our millage cap as well. So even if we were able to place those bonds using the small amount of millage that we currently have between where we are and where we can be, it's not going to be enough to address the significant infrastructure needs that we have today. I told you about the resurfacing. What we learned was we needed to put in about $15 million to make up for all of the growth that happened during the years we were under Fulton County. We just simply don't have that with $4 million of potential investment. Right now, I might guess that most of you would be a little uncomfortable thinking about bonds when this economy is the way it is. However, eventually you may want to, and for all intents and purposes, this is no longer an option. Our charter needs to be corrected so that the question of issuing a bond is separate from that of the millage rate. Our citizens need to be given the option to decide whether issuing bonds for a specific improvement is necessary and in their idea of the best interest of our city. Keep in mind, the council cannot issue bonds. We can call for the referendum, and we can make the case, but in the end, the decision will always be the citizens. This brings me to the second correction that's needed in the charter. Our charter currently calls for over 50% of the eligible voters to approve any referendum that will increase the millage rate above 4.731. And I'll remind you at this time, we are the only new city operating below our millage cap. It was the intention of the charter to mirror referendums, as they are in almost any other matter, that simply 50% of those voting in the referendum determine, 50% or more, determine whether the referendum is to pass or not. That one word, that single word calling for eligible voters means that even if you wanted a bond referendum or you actually wanted to increase the millage rate, that it would take 50% of those who are even eligible to vote to approve that. Folks, I don't know about you, but we're pretty lucky to even get 30% of the voters to come to the polls. I say it every time before an election. Our high water mark barely got above 50%. That means that every single person who voted that year, by the way, that was the year to create the city, would have had to vote yes for the issue. Does anyone here believe that you can get, one, 50% of the people to show up, and two, to all vote in the same direction? I could tell you if the question were, is the sky blue, you wouldn't get 100% to say yes. So it's pretty obvious that the chances of this happening under the current schema of our charter are pretty much impossible. So I believe that folks deserve at least the option. It doesn't mean the city council is going to do this. The bottom line is we support the cap. But right now, there are no options left to us in terms of raising money for this city. All we can do is spend current dollars. And if that's what you're comfortable with, and the pace that you're comfortable doing it, that's what we'll do. We represent you. If you're comfortable with that current pace and you don't mind waiting on, as an example, neighborhood resurfacing, or you don't want us to buy additional green space or make any significant investments in road improvements or capital improvements beyond the small amount that we're able to invest each year, then we don't have to do anything. We don't need to change the charter. But if it's something that you maybe want to consider in the future, or you want to create as an option for yourself later on, then we must request our legislators make the appropriate changes to our charter to give you those options. That's why we're going to continue that dialogue of correcting the charter. We've been talking about it pretty much since the beginning of cityhood. It's my belief that this should be addressed soon. It's fundamentally wrong to ban the citizens from an option to raise funds to improve their own community. Remember, it's not the council's choice. It's not my choice. It's not my fellow council members' choice. It's your choice. Please let us know your thoughts. We are actually discussing this issue at our council meeting this coming Monday, and your input's very much needed. Meanwhile, we will continue to pay our way and remain current and be the fiscally responsible city that we've been to date. We need to strive to build and diversify our tax base, and where appropriate, I believe we need to explore fees to better cover the expenses that citizens are taking on. There's currently a trend away from general taxation and toward fee-based taxation. And the reason for this is very simple. It shifts the burden from everybody to the individual or the business that's causing the city to incur the expense in the first place. I believe for this to be done right, when you institute a fee, you need to also reduce the tax base from where you used to pay for it. In other words, fees don't become additive in nature. There are some exceptions to that. If the fee is part of an unfunded mandate, which let's say the state or the federal government forces upon us, or the citizens demand a new service, and a fee is the way to fund that, then I think the citizens also need to figure out, do you want us to then cut other expenses, which might also mean that we get the unfunded mandate or the service funded, but we cut back on something else. But again, the choice is always yours. We listen to our citizens and we try to react accordingly. Meanwhile, we've continued to look for cost savings, like our collaboration with neighboring jurisdictions to improve our purchasing power and coordinate service delivery. Examples of that is we have an IT partnership with the City of Milton, and of course our partnership with Sandy Springs on Chatcom. We need to encourage private investment in our community where it makes sense. For instance, in the arts. Our community began years before anyone even dreamed of a city. As a group of residents, we're focused very much on getting the best education for their kids in the state of Georgia. And with that, there was a natural movement toward the arts. I believe that we need to encourage the arts to grow where they can. Our schools are there for education and they're doing a phenomenal job despite serious budget cuts. But it's time for business and private individuals to step up and ensure that our small arts community that was beginning to thrive before the economy tanked can make it through this economic downturn and then really grow when it turns around. We have star power in this community, and you know who you are if you're one of them. We have strong fundraising abilities in our community as well, and we need to call on those people who can to step up and get involved. We need to build the best arts community in the state, just as we've been part of delivering the best education in the state. In this and all that we do, greatness comes from within our community. If we're going to continue to raise the bar, we need to step up and do it as a team, together. We cannot wait for this economy to right itself. We need to be ready for those opportunities today. I believe that our greatest strength continues to lie in the diversity and our passion for excellence. And most importantly, in our ability to treasure and respect that in each of us and in all that we do. I look forward to continuing to work with each of you as this year unfolds. And with that thought, I will close the State of the City address. And again, thank you for your time, your good advice, and what you bring to our community. Sharing our city's success is never boring. It's truly an honor to stand before you and represent you. I want to thank you for your attendance today and for lending me the office of the mayor for this, my second term.